The highway ran east-west, past my Chevron station, and both directions looked exactly the same. Just empty asphalt cutting through flat desert under a sky so big it made you feel like an ant. But the westbound lane was busier at night. Way busier. Sometimes I'd watch through the window and count 20, 30 cars passing westbound in an hour, while the eastbound lane sat completely empty. When I mentioned this to my coworker Ray, he laughed and said that's just how it is. Everybody's heading west, heading to California, chasing something better. But I started paying closer attention, and I realized I never saw those cars at the station. With that much westbound traffic, at least some of them should stop for gas or food. But they never did. They just drove past, headlights cutting through the dark, all going the same direction. None of them ever stopping. On my 10th night, I saw a car pull into the station from the eastbound lane. The first eastbound car I'd seen in hours. The driver was a woman in her 40s, and she looked exhausted and terrified. She didn't come inside at first. She just sat in her car at the pump, crying, both hands gripping the steering wheel. When she finally came in to pay, she kept looking over her shoulder at the westbound lane. I asked if she was okay, and she grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt and said, "Don't go west. If you get on the westbound lane at night, you can't stop. You can't pull over. You just have to keep driving until the sun comes up, and most people don't make it that long." I only got away because I crashed through the median. Her car was wrecked on the passenger side, metal scraped raw, and I hadn't even noticed. She left before I could ask what she meant. My name is Tyler Walsh, and I've been working the overnight shift at the Chevron on Route 6, just east of Tonopah, for 3 weeks now. The pay is decent for Nevada, $16.50 an hour plus overnight differential, and the job sounded simple enough. Pump gas, stock shelves, keep the coffee fresh, lock up at 6 a.m. Ray worked the evening shift before me, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., and he'd been here 6 years. He said the overnight shift had high turnover, but he made it sound like people just got bored and quit. On my first night, he handed me a laminated card with 6 rules printed on it. Corporate policy, he said, though the card looked homemade, the text printed on regular printer paper and sealed with packing tape. Follow these exactly. Don't skip any. Don't improvise. I asked what would happen if I didn't follow them. Ray looked at me for a long moment, then walked out without answering. That was 3 weeks ago. Now I understand why the overnight shift has high turnover. Now I understand why Ray wouldn't answer my question. The rules were simple enough on the surface. Between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., keep the interior lights at exactly 60% brightness. Not higher, not lower. If a customer asks about the westbound lane, tell them the station doesn't service that side of the highway. Do not elaborate. Never go outside between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. unless a customer needs fuel. If you must go out, stay within the fluorescent perimeter of the pump lights. If you hear knocking on the back door, ignore it. The delivery schedule is posted on the office wall. Anything else isn't a delivery. At exactly 3:33 a.m., turn off the radio. Keep it off for 10 minutes. Do not listen to anything during this time. If someone asks to use your phone, tell them the landline is broken. Give them the number for the payphone outside instead. The card didn't explain why. Ray didn't explain why. Corporate certainly didn't explain why when I called the regional office my second day to ask about unusual employee guidelines. The woman on the phone said she'd never heard of any special rules for the Tonopah location and suggested I speak with my direct supervisor. Ray was my direct supervisor. When I asked him about it, he said the rules kept the overnight shift running smooth, and that was all I needed to know. Then he showed me how to work the register, where the mop was kept, and which coffee machines to turn off at closing. My first week passed without incident. The station sat in the kind of lonely stretch where you could see headlights coming from miles away, watch them approach, and know whether they'd stop long before they reached the pumps. Most didn't. The westbound traffic rolled past in a steady stream. Sedans, trucks, the occasional RV, all moving at exactly the speed limit, none of them slowing down. The eastbound lane was different. It stayed empty for hours. Then a single car would appear, always driving too fast or too slow, never quite right. Those were the ones that stopped. On my 8th night, I started keeping a notebook. I wrote down the time, direction, and make of every car that pulled in. Between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., I logged 17 customers. Every single one came from the eastbound lane. Every single one looked exhausted, some of them shaking, a few with that hollow stare you see on people who've just survived something bad. None of them wanted to talk about where they'd been. I was restocking the cold case at 1:47 a.m. when the first weird thing happened. A man came in from the pumps, maybe 60 years old, wearing a Reno Aces baseball cap and a windbreaker that had seen better days. He walked straight to the counter, didn't browse, didn't grab a drink or a snack. "You service the westbound side?" he asked. I remembered Rule 2. "Station doesn't service that side of the highway," I said. "Why not?" "That's just how it is." He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Recognition, maybe, or relief. "Smart kid," he said. "Keep it that way." He left without buying anything. At 2:15 a.m., I heard knocking on the back door. 3 solid knocks, evenly spaced, the kind the delivery driver would make. I walked toward the stockroom, already reaching for my keys, when I remembered Rule 4. I stopped and checked the delivery schedule taped to the office wall. Next delivery wasn't until Thursday morning at 8 a.m. It was Tuesday night. The knocking came again. 3 knocks, same rhythm, same force. I went back to the front counter and pretended I hadn't heard anything. The knocking stopped after the 3rd attempt. At 3:15 a.m., I turned off the radio. The clock on the wall ticked toward 3:33, and I waited, watching the second hand crawl. When it hit 3:33 exactly, I reached over and clicked the power button. The classic rock station cut off mid-song, and the store went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerators and the distant sound of wind outside. I stood there behind the counter, arms crossed, counting the minutes in my head. That's when I heard it. Static from the radio, even though I'd turned it off. Faint at first, then louder, crackling through the speakers like something trying to find the right frequency. I looked down and saw the power button was still in the off position, the little red indicator like dark. But the static kept going, rising and falling in waves, and underneath it I could hear something else. Voices. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all talking at once, overlapping and urgent and too distorted to make out individual words. They sounded far away, like I was listening to a transmission from the other side of something vast and empty. I stared at the radio, afraid to touch it, afraid to move. The voices got louder. Then, at 3:43 a.m., they stopped. The radio went silent. The indicator lights stayed dark. Everything was normal again, except for the sweat on my palms and the fact that I was standing 3 feet back from the counter, pressed against the cigarette display, without remembering how I'd gotten there. I turned the radio back on at 3:44 a.m. Classic rock, same as before. I didn't tell Ray about it the next day. The next 3 nights were quiet, and I started to think maybe I'd imagined the voices. Maybe the radio had some kind of electrical fault, some weird feedback loop that kicked in at odd hours. I told myself that's all it was, even though I didn't believe it. Ray noticed I was jumpy. On my 14th night, he came in early, around 10:45 p.m., carrying a bag from the pizza place in town. He set it on the counter and pulled out 2 slices of pepperoni. "You look like hell," he said. "Thanks." "You following the rules?" "Every single one." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Keep it up. Gets easier after the first month." "What happens after the first month?" "You stop asking questions." He left at 11 p.m. sharp, same as always, and I settled in for another shift. I dimmed the lights to 60%, checked the delivery schedule, and made sure the radio was on the classic rock station. Everything normal. Everything by the book. The westbound traffic started around midnight. I counted cars out of habit now, marking them in my notebook. 18 in the first hour. 22 in the second. All of them moving at exactly 65 miles per hour. None of them slowing down. None of them stopping. At 1:30 a.m., a pickup truck pulled in from the eastbound lane. Ford F-250, Nevada plates, covered in dust like it had been driving through dirt roads. The driver was a younger guy, maybe late 20s, wearing a Pearl Jam t-shirt and looking like he hadn't slept in 2 days. He came inside, grabbed a Red Bull from the cooler, and brought it to the counter. His hands shook when he pulled out his wallet. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, long drive." "Where are you coming from?" He hesitated, glancing back toward the windows, toward the westbound lane outside. "California," he said finally. "Reno, technically. Left around 9 p.m. I didn't know much about Nevada geography, but I knew Reno was west of here, way west. If he left Reno at 9 p.m. heading east, he should have passed through Tonopah hours ago. It was past 1 a.m. now. "That's a 4-hour drive," I said. "I know." "Took you a while." He didn't answer, just handed me a 20 for the Red Bull, told me to keep the change, and walked back to his truck. I watched him through the window as he sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, staring at the westbound lane like he was checking for something. Then he pulled out, heading east, taillights disappearing into the dark. I wrote it down in my notebook. Ford F-250, eastbound, 1:37 a.m., shaking hands, won't explain delay. At 2:05 a.m., I heard the knocking again. 3 solid knocks on the back door, same rhythm as before. I checked the delivery schedule even though I already knew what it would say. Next delivery, Thursday, 8 a.m. Today was Wednesday. Tonight was Wednesday. The knocking came again. I stayed at the front counter. The third round of knocking was louder this time, more insistent, and I heard something else underneath it. Scraping. Like fingernails on metal. Long, slow drags against the door, starting at the top and dragging down to the bottom. I turned the radio up and pretended I couldn't hear it. At 2:47 a.m., a woman came in, late 50s, gray hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a University of Nevada hoodie. She looked tired but steady, not shaking like most of the eastbound drivers. She browsed the aisles for a few minutes, picked up a bag of trail mix and a bottle of water, then came to the counter. "Quiet night," she said. "Usually is." She glanced at the windows at the westbound lane. "You ever noticed how much traffic goes west?" I felt something tighten in my chest. Rule 2. If a customer asks about the westbound lane, tell them the station doesn't service that side of the highway. "Station doesn't service that side," I said. I wasn't asking about service. I was asking if you noticed. "I notice a lot of things." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I used to live in Tonopah. Grew up here, actually. Left for college in '82 and never came back until tonight. You know what happened in 94? I shook my head. Tour bus crashed on the westbound lane, about 2 miles west of here. 43 people on board. Band from Los Angeles heading to a gig in Salt Lake City. Driver fell asleep at the wheel, went off the road, and the whole thing rolled 38 dead. 5 survivors. She paused, watching me. They say the crash happened at 3:33 a.m., right down to the minute. Driver's watch stopped at that exact time. Every watch on every body stopped at 3:33. My mouth went dry. That was 30 years ago, she continued. But every year on the anniversary, October 14th, people report weird things on that stretch of highway. Lights that follow them. Voices on the radio. Cars that shouldn't be there. Today is October 14th, I said. I know. She paid for her items and left without another word. I checked my phone. October 14th. I hadn't even realized. I'd been so focused on the routine, on the rules, that I'd lost track of dates. The westbound traffic picked up after 3 a.m. I counted 32 cars in 15 minutes, more than I'd ever seen in such a short span. They moved in a steady stream, headlights blending together, and I realized I couldn't tell where one car ended and the next began. At 3:28 a.m., I walked over to the radio. My hand hovered over the power button. 5 minutes until 3:33. Rule 5 said to turn it off at exactly that time. I could turn it off early. That wouldn't break the rule, technically. It just said to turn it off at 3:33, not to keep it on until 3:33. But something stopped me. I waited. At 3:33 a.m., I turned off the radio. The static started immediately. Louder than before, crackling through the speakers even though the power was off, even though the indicator light was dark. The voices came through clearer this time. I could make out fragments. Can't stop. Following us. Please, someone. 3:33. We're stuck at 3:33. The windows rattled. All of them at once. Glass shaking in the frames like something had hit the building. I turned toward the westbound lane and saw them. Headlights. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All moving together in a perfect line. So close they looked like a single beam of light stretching from horizon to horizon. They weren't on the highway. They were beside it, parallel to the road, moving through the empty desert where nothing should be able to drive. And they were all heading toward the station. The voices on the radio got louder, overlapping, desperate. 38 of us. We can't stop. Help us. Please. I grabbed the counter, legs weak, watching the lights approach. They moved fast, too fast, covering ground that should take minutes and seconds. The whole building shook now, rattling like we were in an earthquake, and the lights grew brighter, closer, until I could see individual headlight beams, all of them aimed at the station. Then, at 3:43 a.m., they vanished. The static stopped. The shaking stopped. The westbound lane was empty. I stood there, gripping the counter, trying to catch my breath. My notebook had fallen to the floor. The radio sat silent and dark on the shelf behind me. I turned it back on at 3:44 a.m., hands shaking so bad I nearly knocked it over. Classic rock, same station, same song that had been playing before, like nothing had happened. If you like the stories, please hype the videos from a button like this just above the comment section. They helps the videos to get more reach and perform well. It would take just a few seconds and cost nothing, but would help the channel grow even faster. Thank you. I called in sick the next night. Ray sounded disappointed but not surprised. He said he'd cover the shift himself and told me to get some rest. I spent the whole night lying in bed in my apartment above the Desert Rose Motel, staring at the ceiling, listening to traffic on Route 6 below. The second night, I called in again. Ray said if I didn't show up for the third night, I'd be fired. I showed up. He was waiting for me at 10:45 p.m., sitting in his truck in the parking lot. When I pulled in, he got out and walked over to my beat-up Dodge Neon before I could even kill the engine. "Get out," he said. I did. He looked me over like he was inspecting damage on a used car. "You saw something." "How do you know?" "Because everyone sees something around the 2-week mark. That's when it tests you. Sees if you'll break the rules." "What is it?" "Doesn't matter what it is. Matters that you follow the rules." "That's not an answer." Ray lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and stared at the westbound lane. "I've been working this station for 6 years. Day shift, evening shift, overnight. I've done them all. The overnight is different. Always has been. Corporate knows. They don't talk about it, but they know. That's why the overnight pay is higher. That's why they go through 5, 6 people a year trying to fill the position." "What happened to the last person?" "Quit after 3 weeks. Same as the one before that. Same as the one before that." He flicked ash onto the pavement. "The one before them didn't quit. He disappeared, left his car in the parking lot, keys in the ignition, wallet on the counter. Never came home." "When?" "October 14th, 2 years ago." "That's why the rules exist," Ray continued. "They're not suggestions. They're not guidelines. They're the only thing standing between you and whatever the hell is out there on that highway." "Why do you stay?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Same reason you came back tonight. Because bills don't pay themselves, and there aren't a lot of jobs in Tonopah that pay $16.50 an hour." He walked back to his truck and drove away. I went inside and started my shift. The first few hours passed without incident. I kept the lights at 60%, checked the delivery schedule twice, and made sure the radio stayed on. The notebook sat on the counter next to the register, and I marked down every car that pulled in 7 customers between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. All eastbound. All looking like they'd seen something they couldn't explain. At 2:10 a.m., the knocking started again. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. I ignored it, same as before, but this time I heard something else. A voice, muffled, coming from behind the door, speaking in a rhythm that matched the knocking. "Let me in. Knock, knock, knock. Let me in. Knock, knock, knock. Let me in." I turned the radio up louder. Classic rock station. Some Fleetwood Mac song I didn't know the name of. The volume drowned out the knocking, but I could still feel it. Vibrations traveling through the floor, through the walls, through my chest. At 2:47 a.m., a truck pulled in. Big rig, the kind that hauls long-distance freight. It came from the eastbound lane and stopped at the diesel pumps. The driver got out. A woman in her 30s wearing a Peterbilt cap and coveralls stained with road grime. She came inside, moving stiff like her legs had been folded in a cab for too long. "Coffee fresh?" she asked. "Made it an hour ago." She poured herself a large cup, black, and brought it to the counter along with a pack of Marlboros. While I rang her up, she glanced at the westbound lane through the window. "Traffic's heavy tonight," she said. "Usually is." "How many you count in the last hour?" I checked my notebook. 43. She nodded slowly, like that confirmed something. "I drive this route twice a week. Reno to Ely, Ely to Reno. Been doing it for 8 years. You know how many westbound cars I usually see at this time of night? How many? 5. Maybe 10 on a busy night. Certainly not 43. She sipped her coffee. "You know what else is weird? I've never seen a single one of those westbound cars at the truck stops, not in Ely, not in Austin, not anywhere. They just drive and never stop. Where do they go? That's what I've been trying to figure out. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. Grainy, taken through a windshield at night, but clear enough to see. A line of cars on the westbound lane, all of them close together, headlights on, moving in perfect formation. Took this last week, about 3 miles west of here. See anything strange? I looked closer. The cars were old. Really old. Sedans from the 80s, maybe early 90s, all of them in pristine condition despite their age. And in the lead vehicle, I could see a shape behind the windshield. Not quite right. Too tall. Too thin. "What is that?" I asked. Wish I knew. She put her phone away. My CB's been picking up weird transmissions on Channel 19 for the past month. Voices. Always between 3 and 4 a.m. Always the same message. Keep driving. Don't stop. Don't look back. Have you responded? Once. Asked who was transmitting. Got nothing but static for 10 seconds. Then a voice said, "Bus 43," and the transmission cut out. Bus 43? Mean anything to you? I thought about the woman from 2 nights ago. The tour bus crash in '94. 38 dead. Maybe, I said. She paid for her coffee and cigarettes and left. I watched her rig pull back onto the eastbound lane, red taillights disappearing into the dark. At 3:28 a.m., I prepared for the radio routine. 5 minutes until 3:33. I stared at the power button, counting seconds in my head. The westbound traffic had picked up again, a steady stream of headlights moving past the station, none of them slowing down. At 3:33 a.m. exactly, I turned off the radio. The static came immediately, but this time it was different, clearer. The voices resolved into distinct words, overlapping but comprehensible. We crashed at 3:33. We've been driving since 3:33 p.m. We can't stop at 3:33. We're stuck at 3:33. Help us at 3:33. The lights outside brightened, and I looked up to see the same phenomenon as before. Headlights in the desert, moving parallel to the road, heading toward the station. But there were more this time. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, stretching back as far as I could see. The building started shaking again. The windows rattled in their frames. The bottles on the shelves clinked together, some of them falling, glass shattering on the floor. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. The headlights got closer, and I could see the vehicles now. Old cars, sedans, station wagons, a few trucks. All of them from the 80s and 90s. All of them pristine. And in the front, leading the procession, was a bus. A tour bus. White with blue stripes. The kind that bands used to travel in before they could afford real tour buses. The windshield was dark, but I could see shapes behind it. People, dozens of them. All sitting perfectly still. All facing forward. The voices on the radio grew louder, more frantic. We can't stop. 38 of us died. 5 survived. But we're all here now. We're all driving. Forever. The bus stopped 50 feet from the station. Just stopped, like it had hit an invisible wall. The procession behind it stopped too. All those cars lined up in perfect formation, headlights blazing. The building shook so hard I thought the walls would crack. Then something moved in the bus. A figure stood up in the driver's seat. Tall. Too tall. It pressed its face against the windshield, and I saw hollow eyes, a mouth stretched too wide, skin pulled tight over bone. The voices on the radio screamed. At 3:43 a.m., everything stopped. The lights vanished. The shaking stopped. The radio went silent. I stood there, surrounded by broken glass and spilled merchandise, breathing hard, sweat dripping down my face. I turned the radio back on at 3:44 a.m. on classic rock. Grateful Dead, truckin'. The westbound lane was empty. I spent the next hour cleaning up the broken bottles and trying to stop my hands from shaking. At 5:30 a.m., Ray showed up early. He took one look at the mess, at my face, and nodded. "You're doing better than most," he said. "This is better? You're still here." He helped me clean up the rest of the glass. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't talk about the rules. We just cleaned in silence until the sun started coming up over the desert, turning the sky orange and gold, making everything look normal again. When 6 a.m. hit, I locked up and walked out to my car. The westbound lane was already filling with traffic. Morning commuters, delivery trucks, RVS heading to California. All of them normal. All of them real. But I couldn't stop thinking about the bus. I spent the next day at the Tonopah Public Library, a small brick building on Main Street that smelled like old paper and dust. The librarian, an older woman named Dorothy, helped me search through archived newspapers from 1994. It took 2 hours, but I found it. October 14th, 1994. Front page of the Tonopah Times Bonanza. Tragic bus crash claims 38 lives on Highway 6. The photo showed the wreckage, twisted metal, shattered glass, the bus lying on its side in the desert. The article said it happened at 3:33 a.m. A tour bus carrying a Los Angeles rock band called The Westbound and their crew. Driver fell asleep at the wheel. 5 survivors, 38 dead. The impact was so severe that several bodies were never recovered from the wreckage, scattered across the desert by the force of the crash. There was a list of the dead. Names I didn't recognize, ages ranging from 19 to 54. Musicians, roadies, sound engineers. All of them heading east to a gig in Salt Lake City. All of them gone in an instant. Dorothy noticed me staring at the photo. "Terrible thing," she said. "Worst accident this town's ever seen." They closed that section of highway for 3 days while they cleaned up. Some folks say the desert soaked up so much blood you can still see the stain if you know where to look. Did they ever figure out why the driver fell asleep? Official reports said exhaustion. Band had been touring for 6 weeks straight. But there were rumors. She leaned closer, lowering her voice even though we were alone. Some of the first responders said the driver's eyes were open when they found him. Wide open, like he'd been awake the whole time but couldn't stop the crash. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe he didn't fall asleep. Maybe something else made him lose control." She walked away before I could ask what she meant. I made copies of the article and left. The sun was setting by the time I got back to my motel room, and I sat on the bed reading through everything again, trying to make sense of it. The band was called The Westbound. They crashed at 3:33 a.m. The voices on the radio said they were stuck at 3:33. The procession of cars I'd seen, they were all moving west, toward California, toward where the band had been trying to go. My phone rang. "Ray, you coming in tonight?" he asked. "Yeah." "Good. We need to talk. Come in at 10:30, before the shift starts." He hung up. I got to the station at 10:25 p.m. Ray's truck was already there, parked by the propane tanks. He was standing outside, smoking a cigarette, staring at the westbound lane like he could see something I couldn't. "You went to the library," he said when I walked over. "How did you know?" "Dorothy called me. She calls every time someone starts asking about the crash." He dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his boot. "You found the article?" "Yeah." "Then you know what's out there." "I know what happened 30 years ago. I don't know what's happening now." Ray pulled out another cigarette, but didn't light it. "The crash happened 2 miles west of here. right around mile marker 68. You know how many cars pass that spot every night? Hundreds. More than that. Thousands. And most of them have no idea they're driving through a grave site. He finally lit the cigarette. The 5 survivors all said the same thing. Said they heard music right before the crash, coming from inside the bus, even though the radio was off. Old rock song, something from the 70s. Highway Star by Deep Purple. They said it got louder and louder until the driver started screaming, and then the bus went off the road. The radio in the station plays rock music. I know. Is that why Rule 5 says to turn it off at 3:33? You turn it off so you don't hear what they're broadcasting. The dead ones. They're trying to reach someone, trying to tell someone what happened, but they can't get through unless you're listening at the right time. He took a long drag. Problem is, if you listen too long, you start to hear other things. Instructions, directions. And if you follow those directions, you end up on the westbound lane. What happens then? You join them. That's what happened to the kid who disappeared 2 years ago. I found his car in the parking lot, but I also found his notebook. Last entry said he heard voices telling him to drive west. Said they needed help. Said if he just drove west to mile marker 68, he could save them. Did he go? His car was here. He wasn't. So yeah, I think he went. And I think whatever's out there got him. We stood in silence for a moment, watching a semi-truck roll past on the westbound lane. Why do you stay? I asked again. Because someone has to. Because if this station closes, there's nothing between here and Ely. 60 miles of empty highway, and the things on that highway need somewhere to anchor. The station keeps them contained. The rules keep them from spreading. He looked at me. You understand what I'm saying? Not really. The rules aren't just protecting you. They're protecting everyone who drives through here. Every car that passes by, every family on a road trip, every truck driver trying to make a delivery. They're all safe because this station exists and because someone follows the rules. You break the rules, the containment breaks, and then those things can go wherever they want. I felt something heavy settle in my chest. That's why corporate doesn't care about the rules. They don't want to know. Exactly. He walked me through the shift change routine, same as always, then got in his truck and left. I went inside and started my shift. The first few hours were quiet. I kept the lights at 60%, checked the delivery schedule, and monitored the traffic. Westbound lane stayed busy. Eastbound lane stayed mostly empty. Everything normal. Everything predictable. At 1:15 a.m., an old Chevy Impala pulled in from the eastbound lane. Pale blue, late 80s model, Nevada plates. The driver was a kid, maybe 22, with shaggy hair and a pearl-jammed shirt. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking when he opened the door. He came inside and walked straight to the counter. I need to use your phone, he said. Rule 6. If someone asks to use your phone, tell them the landline is broken. Give them the number for the payphone outside instead. Landline's broken, I said. Payphone's outside by the air pump. Here's the number. I handed him a card with the payphone number printed on it. We kept a stack of them by the register. He stared at the card like I'd handed him a death sentence. I can't go back outside, he said. Why not? Because it's out there, following me. Every time I stop, it catches up. Every time I get out of my car, I can see it in the distance. Headlights, just one set. Always the same distance away. Always getting closer. How long has it been following you? Since I got on the westbound lane in Reno, 11 hours ago. I've been driving in circles, trying to lose it, but I can't. It's always there. His voice cracked. Please, I just need to call my girlfriend. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I should have listened. Listened to what? She said not to drive tonight. Said her grandmother used to live in Tonopah and always said October 14th was a bad night to be on Highway 6. But I didn't listen. I thought she was being superstitious. I looked past him, through the window toward the parking lot. His Impala sat at the pumps, interior light on, driver's door still open. And beyond it, maybe a quarter mile down the westbound lane, I saw a single set of headlights, not moving, just sitting there, waiting. How did you get off the westbound lane? I asked. I didn't. I'm still on it. This station is on it. Everything west of Ely is on it. He grabbed the counter. You don't understand. Once you get on that lane at night, you can't get off. The exits don't work. The turnoffs don't work. You just keep driving and driving, and eventually you realize you're not going anywhere. You're just moving through the same stretch of road over and over. That's not possible. I've passed the station 6 times tonight. 6 times. And every time I try to stop, those headlights get closer. I looked at the headlights again. They were closer now, maybe an eighth of a mile. I could see the shape of the vehicle behind them. A bus, white with blue stripes. The kid saw it too. Oh, God, he said. Oh, God, it found me. Get back in your car, I said. Drive east. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just drive until the sun comes up. I can't. I'm out of gas. Then stay inside. Stay in the light. Don't go past the pump perimeter. The headlights were getting closer. 100 yards, 75, 50. The bus stopped at the edge of the station property, right where the fluorescent light from the pumps ended, and the darkness began. I could see the driver now. Tall. Too tall. Face pressed against the windshield. Hollow eyes. Mouth stretched wide. The kid started crying. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry. At 2:03 a.m., the knocking started on the back door. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. But this time, the voice was different. It was the kid's voice. Let me in. I looked at him. He was standing at the counter, tears streaming down his face. But the voice at the back door kept going. Let me in. His mouth wasn't moving. Let me in. The kid looked at me, eyes wide with terror. That's not me, he said. The bus outside started moving forward, crossing into the fluorescent perimeter, heading straight for the station. The bus crossed into the light. The fluorescent glow from the pump canopy hit the windshield, and I saw them. Faces, pressed against every window. Dozens of them, pale, motionless, all staring at the station, all staring at us. Get away from the windows, I said to the kid. He didn't move. Just stood there watching the bus approach, tears still streaming down his face. I grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the back of the store, past the cold cases, toward the stockroom. The knocking on the back door was louder now, more frantic, and the voice kept repeating, Let me in, let me in, let me in. The kid's voice. But the kid was here with me, and his mouth still wasn't moving. The bus stopped 20 feet from the front doors. The engine was still running. I could hear it through the walls, a low rumble that made the floor vibrate. The headlights blazed through the windows, casting long shadows across the aisles, turning everything harsh and overexposed. The driver's door of the bus opened. Something stepped out. It was tall. Too tall to fit in the normal bus, too tall to fit in any vehicle made for humans. It stood at least 7 feet, maybe 8, limbs stretched and wrong, joints bending in ways that made my brain hurt to process. It wore the remains of a driver's uniform, blue shirt, black pants, but the clothes hung on its frame like they'd been put on a scarecrow. The face was worst of all. Human once, maybe, but stretched. Skin pulled so tight over the skull that I could see every bone underneath, every curve and hollow. The mouth hung open, jaw unhinged, and inside there was nothing but darkness. No teeth, no tongue, just empty space that seemed to go down and down and down. It started walking toward the doors. Rule 3, I said out loud, trying to remember. Never go outside between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. unless a customer needs fuel. Stay within the fluorescent perimeter. The thing stopped at the door. Just stopped, like it had hit an invisible barrier. It tilted its head, studying the entrance, then reached out with one long-fingered hand and pressed it against the glass. The door rattled but didn't open. The kid made a sound behind me. Not quite a scream, more like air escaping from a tire, a slow hiss of pure terror. "It can't come in," I said. "The rules. It can't break the rules." "What about the back door?" I turned. The knocking had stopped. The voice had stopped. Everything was quiet except for the bus engine and the sound of our breathing. Then I heard footsteps. In the stockroom, coming from inside the building. "We locked the back door," I said. "I checked it at the start of shift. It's locked." "Then how did it get in?" I didn't have an answer. The footsteps came closer. Slow. Measured. The kind of footsteps someone makes when they're not in a hurry, when they know you can't escape, when they're savoring every second. I grabbed the kid and pulled him behind the counter. We crouched there, hidden from view, listening to those footsteps move through the stockroom, through the office, getting closer to the main floor. The thing at the front door was still there, still pressing its hand against the glass. Through the gaps in the counter, I could see more figures emerging from the bus, smaller ones, human-sized. They moved in jerky stop motion, like their joints only worked in certain positions, and they arranged themselves in a line behind the driver, all of them facing the doors. 38 of them, the same number that died in the crash. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath. A voice spoke from somewhere above us. The kid's voice again, but wrong, like someone doing an impression without quite getting the pitch right. "I know you're here." The kid next to me started shaking. I put my hand over his mouth to keep him quiet. "I can smell you. Smell the fear. Smell the life." The voice moved, circling around the counter. "You should have let me in when I asked. Would have been easier. Would have been quick." I looked at my watch. 2:18 a.m. Still over an hour until 3:33. Still over an hour until the radio event. I didn't know if we could last that long. The kid bit my hand. Not hard. Just enough to get my attention. He pointed toward the office, toward the back hallway. His eyes were wide, pleading. He wanted to run. I shook my head. Rule 3. Stay in the light. Don't go into the back areas between 2 and 4 a.m. He pointed again, more insistent. I realized he was pointing at something specific. The electrical panel, mounted on the wall in the back hallway. The breaker box that controlled the lights. If the lights went out, would the rules still work? If the lights went out, would the things outside be able to come in? I didn't want to find out. The voice above us laughed. "I can wait. I've been waiting 30 years. What's another hour?" Then it started singing. Quietly at first, barely audible, but growing louder with each verse. "Highway Star" by Deep Purple, The same song the survivors heard before the crash. The words came out distorted, multiple voices singing at once, harmonizing in ways that shouldn't be possible. The kid covered his ears. I forced myself to stay calm, to think. The rules were protecting us. The thing couldn't come in. The driver couldn't cross the threshold. As long as we stayed inside, stayed in the light, stayed quiet, the singing stopped. "I'm not the one you need to worry about," the voice said. "I'm not the one who's already inside." I looked at the kid. He looked back at me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then I noticed something. His shadow, cast by the overhead lights, stretched across the floor behind him. It was moving, not following his movements, moving independently, reaching, growing, the edges becoming less defined, spreading across the tiles like spilled ink. The kid saw it too. He looked down, saw his shadow stretching toward me, and let out a strangled sound. "Don't," I said. "Don't move. Don't react. It's trying to make you panic." But his shadow kept growing, kept reaching, and I could see something taking shape within it. A figure, rising up from the floor like smoke, like darkness given form. The kid bolted. He ran toward the front doors, toward the bus, toward the things waiting outside. I shouted for him to stop, but he wasn't listening. He slammed into the doors, pushing them open, and stumbled out into the parking lot. The driver's head snapped toward him. All 38 figures turned as one. The kid made it 3 steps before they converged on him. I didn't see what happened. The headlights were too bright, the figures too many, all of them surrounding him in a tight circle. But I heard it. The sounds he made. Not screams exactly. More like the noise an animal makes when it realizes it's been caught, when it knows there's no escape, when all that's left is to wait for the end. The sounds lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then silence. The figures parted, and the kid was gone. Not dead, not torn apart, just gone, like he'd never been there at all. His car still sat at the pumps, door open, interior light on, but the driver was nowhere to be seen. The driver looked at me through the glass doors. It smiled. Then it turned and walked back to the bus, all 38 figures following in formation. They climbed back inside, the door closed, and the bus reversed out of the parking lot, back past the light perimeter, back to the edge where darkness met fluorescence. It waited there. I checked my watch. 2:47 a.m. 46 minutes until 3:33. I spent that time trying not to think about the kid, trying not to think about what just happened, trying to focus on the rules. The rules were absolute. The rules kept you safe. The kid broke. Rule 3. He went outside during the prohibited hours. He went beyond the light. That's why he was taken. That's what I told myself. At 3:15 a.m., a pickup truck pulled in from the eastbound lane. Ford Ranger, older model, Nevada plates. The driver was a woman in her 60s, gray hair tied back, wearing a denim jacket. She started pumping gas, and I watched her through the window, waiting to see if she'd notice the bus. She didn't. She filled her tank, came inside, paid for her gas with cash, and left without saying a word about the tour bus sitting in the dark or the 38 figures visible in its windows. Maybe she couldn't see it. Maybe only certain people could. At 3:28 a.m., I walked over to the radio. 5 minutes until 3:33. The bus was still waiting at the edge of the light. I could see the driver in the front seat, that stretched face pressed against the windshield watching me. My hands were shaking when I reached for the power button. At 3:33 a.m., I turned off the radio. The static came immediately, but this time it was different. No voices, just pure static, crackling and hissing through the speakers, growing louder by the second. The building started shaking again, harder than before, and I grabbed the counter to steady myself. The bus started moving forward, into the light, through the perimeter, straight toward the doors. The static grew louder, and I realized it wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was coming from everywhere. From the walls, from the floor, from the air itself. The sound of radio frequencies colliding, of transmissions overlapping, of 38 voices trying to speak at once. The bus stopped at the doors. The driver got out. This time it didn't stop at the threshold. It reached for the handle, and I heard the lock click open. Rule 3 wasn't working anymore. The rules were breaking. The driver pushed the door open and stepped inside. I backed away, moving toward the office, toward the back hallway, but I knew there was nowhere to go. The thing moved faster than anything that size should be able to move, crossing the distance between us in seconds. It grabbed me by the throat and lifted me off the ground. The hand was cold, not ice cold, emptiness cold, the kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the complete absence of life. I tried to breathe, tried to scream, but nothing came out. The driver leaned in close and I saw into its mouth. That darkness I'd seen before wasn't empty space. It was full of things, voices, screaming, crying, calling for help. 38 voices all trapped inside one mouth, one throat, one endless void. And then I heard something else, a new voice, the kid's voice, calling from inside the darkness. Let me in, let me in, let me in. He was in there now. Part of it. Part of the collective. Part of whatever these things had become. At 3:43 a.m., the static stopped. The driver dropped me. I collapsed to the floor, gasping, throat bruised, vision swimming. When I looked up, the driver was walking back to the bus. All 38 figures climbed inside, the door closed, and the bus reversed out of the parking lot, back to the edge of darkness, back to waiting. I lay there on the floor, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what just happened. The rules had broken. The driver had come inside. It had grabbed me, but it let me go. At 3:44 a.m., I turned the radio back on. Classic rock, Tom Petty, Rummin' Down a Dream. Everything was normal again, except I knew the truth now. The rules weren't absolute. They were temporary, and eventually they would break completely. I didn't call Ray. I didn't call corporate. I didn't call anyone. I just sat behind the counter for the rest of the shift, watching the bus in the distance, rubbing my throat where bruises were already forming in the shape of fingers. At 5 a.m., the bus disappeared. One moment it was there, headlights burning in the darkness. The next, it was gone, like someone had flipped a switch. At 6 a.m., Ray showed up for the shift change. He took one look at my neck and closed his eyes. "It touched you," he said. "Yeah. That's never happened before. Not in 6 years. Not to anyone who survived." He walked over and tilted my chin up, examining the bruises. "How long did it hold you?" "I don't know. 10 seconds, maybe 15. And it let you go." "Yeah. Why?" "I don't know." Ray pulled out his phone and made a call. He didn't say who he was calling, just walked outside and talked in a low voice for 5 minutes. When he came back in, his expression was grim. "Someone's coming," he said. "From the university in Reno, studies this kind of thing. Paranormal phenomena, electromagnetic anomalies, that sort of thing. She's been researching the crash for 3 years. She knows about the bus? She knows about what the bus became." The researcher arrived at 3 p.m. I'd gone back to my motel room to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that darkness inside the driver's mouth. Heard those voices screaming, so when Ray called and said the researcher wanted to meet with both of us, I drove back to the station. Her name was Dr. Elena Vasquez. Late 40s, professor of parapsychology at the University of Nevada, Reno. She wore jeans and a faded UNR sweatshirt, and she carried a duffel bag full of equipment I didn't recognize. We sat in the station office, and she laid out a map of Highway 6 on Ray's desk. Red circles marked various locations along the route, all of them west of Tonopah. "The crash happened here," she said, pointing to a spot 2 miles west. "Mile marker 68. The tour bus went off the road at 3:33 a.m., October 14th, 1994. 38 people died on impact, or shortly after 5 survived." "I know," I said. "What you don't know is what happened in the weeks after the crash. Local CB radio operators started reporting interference on Channel 19. Voices. Transmissions that shouldn't exist. At first, people thought it was feedback, some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. But then the transmissions started forming coherent messages." She pulled out a folder and handed me a stack of printed transcripts, CB radio logs from October and November 1994. I skimmed through them. "Keep driving, don't stop, don't look back. We're stuck at 3:33. We can't move forward, can't move back. Bus 43, we're bus 43. Someone help us. Help us, please. We've been driving for hours, days. We can't stop." Dr. Vasquez pulled out another document. The 5 survivors were all interviewed extensively. Every single one reported the same thing. Right before the crash, they heard music, Highway Star by Deep Purple, coming through the bus's sound system, even though the radio was off. They said it got louder and louder, and then the driver started screaming about headlights following them. Headlights that had been behind them for the last 100 miles, matching their speed exactly, never getting closer, but never falling back. "What were the headlights?" I asked. "That's the question I've been trying to answer for 3 years." She pulled out a laptop and opened several files: graphs, spectral analysis, frequency charts. "I've been monitoring electromagnetic activity along this stretch of highway since 2022. Every October 14th, the readings spike. Radio frequencies go haywire. And every year, people disappear." "How many?" "Officially, 32 in the last 30 years. All of them last seen on the westbound lane between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. on October 14th. All of them driving alone. All of them vanished without a trace." She closed the laptop. "Unofficially, I think it's closer to 100. Most people don't report missing persons who were just passing through Nevada. Truckers, drifters, people running from something. They disappear and nobody notices." Ray lit a cigarette, even though smoking wasn't allowed inside. "What's your theory?" "The crash created a kind of psychic echo. 38 people dying simultaneously, violently, all of them trapped in a vehicle traveling at high speed. That kind of collective trauma leaves an imprint. The electromagnetic signature of their final moments got burned into the fabric of this place. And every year, on the anniversary, that signature repeats, like a recording." "Then why is it getting stronger?" I asked. "Why did it break the rules last night?" Dr. Vasquez looked at me for a long moment. "Because it's not just a recording anymore. It's learning, adapting. Every person who disappears on that highway adds to the signal. Their consciousness, their final moments, all of it gets absorbed into the collective. The phenomenon grows stronger with each victim." "How do we stop it?" "We can't, not permanently, but we might be able to disrupt it." She opened her duffel bag and pulled out a device that looked like a car battery wired to a modified CB radio. "This is an electromagnetic pulse generator, tuned specifically to the frequency range where the phenomenon broadcasts. If we can generate a strong enough pulse at exactly 3:33 a.m., we might be able to create a dead zone, silence the transmission, break the cycle." "For how long?" "I don't know. Could be permanent, could be temporary, but it's worth trying." Ray crushed out his cigarette. "What do you need?" "Power. A lot of it. And I need to be at the exact location where the crash occurred. Mile marker 68, westbound lane. That's outside the light perimeter, I said. Rule 3. You can't be outside between 2 and 4 a.m. The rules only protect people who follow them. I'm not planning to follow them. I'm planning to break them. She smiled, but there was no humor in it. The phenomenon expects fear, expects people to hide, to run, to follow the rules. It doesn't expect someone to fight back. We spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Dr. Vasquez set up her equipment in the bed of Ray's truck. The pulse generator, backup batteries, monitoring equipment, everything she needed to create what she called an electromagnetic dead zone. She explained the theory multiple times, but I only half understood it. Something about disrupting the frequency where the psychic echo transmitted, creating interference that would silence the voices permanently. At 10 p.m., we drove out to mile marker 68. The crash site wasn't marked. No memorial, no sign. Nothing to indicate that 38 people died here. Just empty desert on both sides of the highway, the asphalt running straight and flat toward the horizon. Dr. Vasquez set up her equipment on the shoulder of the westbound lane while Ray and I kept watch. The sun had set an hour ago, and the darkness felt heavier here. Thicker, like the air itself was weighing us down. "How do you know this will work?" I asked. "I don't," she said. "But I've been studying this phenomenon for 3 years. I've interviewed survivors, analyzed transmission logs, monitored electromagnetic activity every October 14th. Everything points to one conclusion. This is a frequency-based phenomenon. The dead are transmitting. If we can disrupt that transmission, we can free them." Free them? Or silence them? I'm not sure which. She connected the final wire. Either way, it ends tonight. At 11:30 p.m., the westbound traffic picked up. Cars began passing in a steady stream, all of them moving at exactly the same speed, all of them spaced evenly apart. I counted 20 in 10 minutes, then 30, then 40. None of them slowed down. None of them stopped. At midnight, Dr. Vasquez's monitoring equipment started picking up signals. "It's beginning," she said. "The frequency is building. Same as every year. By 3:33 a.m., it'll peak." We waited. Ray smoked cigarette after cigarette, throwing the butts into the desert. Dr. Vasquez monitored her equipment, making small adjustments, muttering to herself. I stood at the edge of the road and watched the westbound traffic increase, car after car after car, more than I'd ever seen on this stretch of highway. At 2 a.m., I saw the bus. It appeared in the distance, maybe a mile out, headlights cutting through the darkness, white with blue stripes, moving at the same speed as all the other vehicles, perfectly spaced in the procession. "It's here," I said. Dr. Vasquez looked up. "Right on schedule." The bus approached, and I could see the driver through the windshield. That stretched face, those hollow eyes, the 38 figures behind it, all pressed against the windows, all staring straight ahead. It passed us without slowing down. "Where's it going?" Ray asked. "Toward the station," I said. "Same as every night." Dr. Vasquez checked her watch. "We have 90 minutes until the pulse. Once we activate it, the phenomenon should collapse. But I need you both to understand something. If this works, if we disrupt the frequency, there might be consequences. These entities exist because of the transmission. Without it, they might dissipate. Or they might become something worse." "Worse how?" Ray asked. "I don't know. That's the problem with experimental parapsychology. You don't know what'll happen until you try it." We kept waiting. The westbound traffic grew denser, the gaps between vehicles shrinking until they moved in one continuous line. Hundreds of cars, maybe thousands, all heading west, all maintaining perfect formation. At 3 a.m., Dr. Vasquez's equipment started screaming. Alarms went off on 3 different devices. The frequency monitor showed readings spiking off the chart. The electromagnetic field detector spun wildly. The needle maxed out in the red zone. "It's early," she said. "The phenomenon is building faster than previous years. We need to activate the pulse now." "You said 3:33. "I know what I said, but if we wait, it might be too strong. We might lose our window." Ray looked at me. I looked at Dr. Vasquez. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the pulse generator. "Do it," I said. She flipped the switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every light on her equipment went dark. The truck's engine died. My phone shut off. Ray's flashlight went out. Even the stars seemed dim, like someone had turned down the brightness of the entire world. The westbound traffic stopped. All of it. Every single vehicle. Just froze in place on the highway, headlights still on, engines still running, but completely motionless. Then the screaming started. Not from us, from the highway, from the cars, from the empty air itself. Thousands of voices all screaming at once, overlapping, building into a wall of sound so loud it felt like my eardrums would burst. Dr. Vasquez grabbed her head, falling to her knees. Ray shouted something I couldn't hear over the screaming, and the bus, sitting half a mile up the road, started moving backward, toward us, fast. The bus covered the distance in seconds, reversing at a speed that shouldn't be possible. Tires screeching against asphalt, even though it was moving backward. I grabbed Dr. Vasquez and pulled her toward Ray's truck, but she fought me, reaching for her equipment. "The pulse is working," she shouted over the screaming. "We can't stop now. We're going to die." "Then we die, but we finish this." The bus was 50 yards away, 40, 30. Ray grabbed the pulse generator and cranked something on its side. The device started humming, a low vibration that I could feel in my teeth, in my bones, in the cavity of my chest, where my heart was trying to pound its way out. The bus stopped 20 feet from us. The driver's door opened, and it stepped out. That stretched thing wearing human skin, joints bending wrong, limbs too long. But this time, it wasn't alone. All 38 figures emerged from the bus, climbing out through windows, through the emergency exit, through gaps in the metal that shouldn't exist. They formed a circle around us. The screaming stopped. The sudden silence was worse somehow, heavy and expectant, like the moment before a storm breaks. Dr. Vasquez's equipment sparked and smoked, but the pulse generator kept humming, kept vibrating, the frequency building higher and higher. The driver tilted its head, studying us. Then it spoke, and the voice came from everywhere at once. From the figures surrounding us, from the bus, from the empty air. "You're trying to erase us." "I'm trying to free you," Dr. Vasquez said. Her voice shook, but she stood her ground. "You've died 30 years ago. You shouldn't still be here. You shouldn't still be suffering." "We're not suffering. We're driving. We've always been driving. We'll always be driving. That's not life. That's not existence. That's just repetition, a loop, a recording playing over and over." The driver moved closer. We were on our way to something important, a show in Salt Lake City, our first big venue. We can't stop now. We can't give up. We just need to keep driving. "You never made it to Salt Lake City," I said. "You crashed. You all died. The show never happened." The figures around us stirred, a ripple of movement passing through the circle. Some of them looked confused, like they were hearing this information for the first time. Others just stared with those hollow eyes, faces blank. "We're still on the road," the driver said. "We're still moving. That means We're still alive. You're trapped, Dr. Vasquez said. Trapped in the moment of your death. The trauma of the crash burned itself into this highway, and you've been repeating it ever since, every year. Every October 14th. Every 3:33 a.m. Then let us repeat. Let us drive. We're not hurting anyone. You've killed 100 people in 30 years, maybe more. Everyone who gets on the westbound lane at night. Everyone who can't escape your frequency. They join you. They become part of the loop. The driver was silent for a long moment. Then it looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something flicker in those hollow eyes. Recognition. Memory. You work at the station, it said. Yeah. You turn off the radio at 3:33 p.m. Yeah. Why? Because the rules say to. The rules. It laughed, a sound like glass breaking in slow motion. The rules were made to contain us, to keep us from spreading. But we don't want to spread. We just want to reach Salt Lake City. We just want to finish what we started. Dr. Vasquez's pulse generator was vibrating so hard now that it was starting to move across the truck bed. Ray grabbed it, holding it steady, and I could see his hands blistering from the heat. You can't reach Salt Lake City, Dr. Vasquez said. You're already dead. The only way forward is to accept that, to let go. We can't let go. We have passengers, people who joined us along the way, people who needed a ride west. We can't abandon them. The passengers are your victims. You're not helping them. You're trapping them. The figures around us began to move, closing the circle tighter. I could see their faces now, really see them. Some wore clothes from the 90s, flannel shirts, ripped jeans, band t-shirts, but others wore more recent styles. Clothes from this decade, this year. The kid from last night was there, standing between two roadies, his face already starting to stretch and distort. He looked at me, and his mouth moved. No sound came out, but I could read his lips. Help me. The pulse generator's humming reached a crescendo, a frequency so high it was almost beyond hearing. Dr. Vasquez shouted something about critical mass, about the transmission being disrupted, about now or never. Ray's hands were smoking where they touched the generator, but he didn't let go. The driver moved fast. One moment it was 20 feet away. The next it was right in front of me. That stretched face inches from mine, darkness pouring from its open mouth. You broke the rules last night, it said. You went outside during prohibited hours. You belong to us now. I didn't go outside, the kid did. But you let him. You let him run. You let him die. The driver reached out, those long fingers wrapping around my throat again. That makes you part of this, part of us. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The cold emptiness of its touch spread through my body, and I felt my thoughts starting to slow, starting to loop, starting to repeat the same moment over and over. We're driving. We're still driving. We can't stop driving. Then Dr. Vasquez pressed something on the pulse generator, and the world exploded. Not literally, but the frequency hit a peak that felt like it tore through reality itself. Every light on the highway went out. Every engine died. Every sound ceased except for a high-pitched whine that seemed to come from inside my skull. The driver released me and staggered backward. All 38 figures fell to their knees, hands over their ears, mouths open in silent screams. The bus started to flicker, becoming translucent, fading in and out of existence. Dr. Vasquez was shouting, but I couldn't hear her over the whine. She pointed at the generator, at a red button on its side. Ray looked at me, and I understood what she wanted. This was it, the final push, the frequency spike that would either break the phenomenon or kill us all. I crawled across the truck bed, vision swimming, and pressed the button. The whine stopped. Everything stopped. For a moment, there was absolute silence. No wind, no engines, no voices, nothing but the sound of my own heartbeat, too fast, too loud, echoing in the emptiness. Then the bus shattered, not physically, but the image of it, the presence of it, the reality of it. All of it broke apart like a reflection in water when you throw a stone. The 38 figures around us began to dissolve, their forms breaking down into particles of light that drifted upward into the night sky. The driver stood alone, the last one remaining. It looked at its hands, watching them disintegrate. And for a moment I saw its face change. The stretched skin, the hollow eyes, the distorted features, they all fell away, revealing something underneath. A man, middle-aged, tired, human. "We were so close," he said, and his voice was normal now. Just a man's voice, quiet and sad. Salt Lake City was only 3 hours away. "I know," Dr. Vasquez said. "Will someone tell our families? Tell them we tried." "They already know. They've known for 30 years. The driver nodded slowly. Then he smiled, and it was a real smile this time, not that stretched rictus. "Good. That's good." He dissolved into light and drifted upward, joining the others. The westbound lane was empty. The bus was gone. The 38 figures were gone. Even the kid was gone. His light rising into the sky with all the others, finally free. Dr. Vasquez's equipment sparked one final time, and then went dark. The pulse generator melted into slag, the heat finally destroying it. Ray's hands were burned raw, but he was alive. We were all alive, and the highway was quiet. We stood there for a long time, watching the lights drift higher and higher, until they disappeared among the stars. Cars started moving again on the westbound lane, their engines coming back to life. Drivers probably wondering why they'd stopped, why they couldn't remember the last few minutes. Dr. Vasquez sat down hard on the edge of the truck bed, tears streaming down her face. "Did it work?" I asked. "I think so. The frequency is gone. The transmission stopped. I don't detect any residual electromagnetic activity." She wiped her eyes. "They're free now, or gone. I'm not sure there's a difference." Ray wrapped his burned hands in his shirt. "What about the station? What about the rules?" "I don't know. The rules were designed to contain the phenomenon. If the phenomenon is gone." She trailed off, looking at me. "You'll have to test them. See if they're still necessary." We drove back to the station as the sun started to rise. The desert turned gold and pink, beautiful in a way that made the last 8 hours feel like a nightmare, like something that couldn't have actually happened. But my throat still hurt where the driver had grabbed me. Ray's hands were still burned. Dr. Vasquez's equipment was still destroyed. It had happened, all of it. At 6 a.m. we reached the station. Ray parked his truck, and we all got out, standing in the parking lot, looking at the building like we were seeing it for the first time. "What do I do now?" I asked. Ray pulled out his pack of cigarettes, then looked at his burned hands and put it away. "You work your shift, you follow the rules, and you hope to God that what we did tonight actually worked. And if it didn't? Then we're all in a lot of trouble." Dr. Vasquez shook both our hands, carefully, gently, avoiding Ray's burns, and drove away in her Subaru. Ray went home to put ice on his hands, and I stood there in the parking lot, watching the morning traffic build on Highway 6. The westbound lane was busy, but this time I counted cars stopping. 3 in the first hour, families on road trips, truckers needing coffee. Normal people on normal journeys. For the first time in 30 years, the westbound lane was alive again. It's been 3 months since that night at mile marker 68. 3 months since we broke the frequency. 3 months since the bus disappeared. I still work the overnight shift at the Chevron. Still start at 11 p.m. Still clock out at 6 a.m. But everything's different now. The rules are gone. Ray threw away the laminated card 2 weeks after the incident. Just walked into the station one evening, pulled it from the bulletin board, and tossed it in the trash. When I asked if he was sure, he said he'd been monitoring the situation. No more knocking on the back door. No more voices during the radio silence. No more strange occurrences at 3:33 a.m. The phenomenon was dead, or free, depending on how you looked at it. Dr. Vasquez published a paper about it. I didn't understand most of the technical language, but the conclusion was clear. The electromagnetic pulse had disrupted the psychic echo permanently. The frequency that trapped those 38 souls for 30 years was gone. They'd moved on. The westbound lane is normal now. I count maybe 30-40 cars passing in a typical night, and at least half of them stop for gas or food. Real people on real journeys, heading to California or Utah, or just passing through. No more endless processions. No more vehicles that never stop. The eastbound traffic is normal too. People driving home from Las Vegas or Reno, looking tired but happy, carrying stories about casino winnings or losses, about shows they saw, about vacation memories they've made. Just normal people living normal lives. The station hired a new overnight clerk to help with the increased business. Her name is Beth, a college student from Tonopah who needs the money for tuition. She works Tuesday through Thursday, while I cover Friday through Monday. She doesn't know about the rules, doesn't know about the bus, doesn't know what this place used to be. And I don't tell her. Some things are better left buried. Ray's hands healed, though he's got scars now. Pale white marks across his palms where the generator burned him. He says they don't hurt anymore, but sometimes I catch him staring at them like he's trying to remember something important. Dr. Vasquez comes by once a month to take readings. Electromagnetic activity, radio frequencies, ambient temperature, anything that might indicate the phenomenon is returning. So far, everything's been normal. She says it'll probably stay that way. Says once a psychic echo is disrupted on that scale, it rarely reforms. I asked her what happened to all those people who disappeared over the years. The 100 victims who joined the procession, who got trapped in the loop. She said she didn't know. Maybe they moved on with the original 38. Maybe they were released when the frequency broke. Or maybe they were never really there at all. Just projections, echoes of echoes, copies of something that stopped being real a long time ago. I prefer to think they're free. Wherever they are, whatever happened to them, I hope they found peace. The kid haunts me sometimes. I still see his face in my dreams, still hear him saying, "Help me," with his lips, while no sound comes out. I tell myself there was nothing I could do. He broke Rule 3. He ran. He chose his fate. But I wonder if I could have stopped him. If I could have grabbed him, held him back, kept him safe until sunrise. I'll never know. Last week, on a Wednesday night around 2 a.m., a family pulled in from the westbound lane. Mom, Dad, 2 kids asleep in the back seat. They were heading to Los Angeles for Disneyland, driving through the night to avoid traffic. The dad pumped gas while the mom came inside to buy coffee and snacks. "Long drive?" I asked. 3 more hours, she said, smiling, "but we'll make it." They would. I knew they would. Because the highway was safe now. Because the dead had finally stopped driving. I watched their taillights disappear down the westbound lane, heading toward California, toward their destination, toward a future that was actually waiting for them. And for the first time in 3 months, I smiled. My name is Tyler Walsh. I work the overnight shift at a Chevron station in Tonopah, Nevada, and I'm proud to say it's the most boring job I've ever had.